Stories of Granny Rose. The script. My son dumped me at the airport after selling my house, but he forgot one crucial thing. My own flesh and blood abandoned me at Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, like I was some unwanted luggage. "Mom, wait right here. We're just gonna sort out the check-in," said Steve before vanishing with Jessica, his wife. 3 hours later, I realized they weren't coming back. I, Eleanor Vance, 65 years old, a retired teacher, was alone with $200 in my wallet and a shattered heart. What they didn't know was that this silver-haired lady was about to prove that experience trumps cruelty every single time. But before I dive in, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. That September morning, I woke up pumped. Steve had invited me to spend a family weekend at the beach. "Mom, you deserve a break. We haven't taken a trip together in a while," he'd said. I packed my small duffel bag and waited by the front door, feeling giddy. When Steve's SUV pulled up, I noticed something off about his and Jessica's vibe. Shifty looks, suppressed smiles, quiet whispers. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to mask my uneasiness. "Sure, Mom. Just running a little late," Steve replied, avoiding eye contact. On the way to what I thought was the coast, Jessica suggested a surprise change of plans. "Eleanor, we were thinking of a surprise. What if instead of the beach, we hit up Miami? You always wanted to see the Florida coast, right?" My heart did a little flip. A flight? I hadn't been on a plane since my husband, Frank, passed 5 years ago. "That would be wonderful," I replied, genuinely touched by the thought. That's when I figured out why we were going to the airport. Or so I thought. "Mom, hold tight here with the bag. We're going to check in and we'll be right back," Steve said, pointing to a bench near the Terminal 1 entrance. "Don't you want me to come with you?" I asked, confused. "No need. Chill out. We'll get it all sorted super fast," Jessica said with a smile I now recognize as totally fake. They walked off, deep in conversation, and a tiny alarm went off in my head. But I shut it down. After all, this was my son, my only son. An hour passed, then 2. By the 3rd hour, an airport employee, a nice young guy, approached, noticing a lone woman waiting for so long. "Ma'am, are you waiting for someone?" "My son and daughter-in-law. They went to check in," I answered, my voice already shaking with the suspicion starting to gnaw at me. "Which airline?" he asked gently. That's when it hit me I didn't even know. They hadn't told me exactly where we were going. What flight? Nothing. The employee walked me over to the information desk, and after multiple attempts to locate my name on any passenger list, the harsh reality set in. There was no reservation for Eleanor Vance on any flight that day. I tried calling Steve straight to voicemail. Messages unanswered. After another hour trying to reach them, I got a single text. "Mom, we just couldn't do it anymore. The house is ours now. We left enough cash for you to get back to the assisted living place." Quote, "Assisted living? I didn't live in an assisted living facility. I lived in my own house, bought with Frank's and my hard-earned savings over 35 years as teachers, the house that Steve apparently now considered his." I sat back down on that same bench, my legs like jelly, trying to process the betrayal. People rushed past, dragging roller bags, living their normal lives while my world was imploding. That's when I noticed a detail. My purse felt lighter. My documents were gone. My driver's license, my social security card, and most alarmingly, the house deed I always carried since Frank died, scared of losing it. There, alone in one of the busiest spots in Los Angeles, I understood I had been a victim not only of abandonment, but of a meticulously crafted scheme by my own flesh and blood. The tears came, sure, but something much stronger was born inside me. Determination. I'm a retired history teacher. I spent 40 years teaching about revolutions, resistance, and overcoming the odds. It was time to apply those lessons to my own life. With the $200 they'd left me, I bought a bus ticket back home. During the 4-hour ride, I didn't cry again. I planned. Because Steve and Jessica thought they were dealing with a helpless old lady. They had no idea they had just woken up a warrior who was only dormant under the blanket of family trust. And now that warrior was heading home, not to beg for a place that was rightfully hers, but to take back everything they tried to steal. My dignity, my house, and most importantly, my independence. What they didn't count on was that this 65-year-old had, as a safety measure, kept backup copies of all her key documents in a bank safety deposit box. Plus, I'd been secretly documenting every suspicious money transfer, every odd conversation, every strange behavior over the past few months. Steve thought he was 3 moves ahead, but I had been silently watching the entire chessboard. My revenge wouldn't be loud or emotional. It would be calculated, cold, and devastating, like the history lessons I taught about great strategists. And it would begin exactly when they least expected it, when they felt secure in their victory. The bus hummed down the highway as I looked out the window, resolute. Steve had learned a lot from me growing up, but he clearly missed the most important lesson. Never underestimate a woman who survived all the storms life threw her way. The gathering of allies. When I got off the bus that night, my town felt different. Or maybe I was different. I didn't go straight home. I knew Steve and Jessica would be there, basking in their perceived victory. Instead, I headed to the one place where I knew I'd find unconditional help. The home of Marge, my friend of 40 years and former colleague. "Eleanor, what happened to you?" Marge exclaimed, opening the door and seeing me standing there with a tiny suitcase and dark circles under my eyes. Over a cup of hot herbal tea in Marge's cozy kitchen, I told her everything. She listened silently, her eyes widening with every detail of the betrayal. "You have to go to the police right now," she said when I finished. "No," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "Not yet. First, I need to know exactly what they've done." That very night, I logged into my online banking using Marge's laptop. As I suspected, huge sums had been transferred out in recent months. Steve had access to my account since Frank passed away to help manage Mom's affairs. And he took full advantage. The statements showed purchases at high-end stores, car payments, trips, all with my money. But the main part of the scheme was in the documents I found when I visited the bank the next morning. Steve had initiated a process to transfer the house deed into his name, using a power of attorney I never signed. The forgery was obvious to me, but convincing enough for a system that rarely questions when a seemingly devoted son takes care of his elderly mother's finances. For 1 week, I stayed with Marge, compiling evidence. I discovered that Steve and Jessica had even hired a social worker to assess my mental capacity, paying for a false report that suggested I suffered from early-stage dementia. This was the final piece of their puzzle. Declare me incompetent and take total control of my assets. "This is criminal," Marge commented as we reviewed the documents. "And they will be treated as such," I replied. "But not just through the formal justice system. I want them to feel every second of the humiliation they tried to inflict on me." I sought out Dr. Paul, an attorney specializing in elder law who had given lectures at the school where I taught. He listened to my story with professional outrage. "Miss Vance, this is far more common than you think. Financial exploitation against seniors, especially by family, is a silent epidemic." He explained all the legal steps we could take, but also cautioned, "The legal process can be slow. Meanwhile, they'll keep living in your house, using your resources." "I have a plan for that too," I replied, surprising him. In the following days, I assembled my strategy. First, with Dr. Paul's help, we filed a police report for document theft and forgery. Then, we obtained an emergency court order to block any transaction involving my assets. But I knew that wouldn't be enough to hit them where it really hurt, their pride. Steve was obsessed with his social image. A business admin grad, he'd built a career as a manager at a well-respected firm, carefully cultivating a reputation as an upstanding, family-focused man. Jessica, on the other hand, was active in local church groups, always posting on social media about family values and caring for our elders. Their hypocrisy would be their undoing. I started frequenting their usual spots, the Safeway where Jessica shopped, the Starbucks near Steve's office, even the church they attended on Sundays. I didn't confront them directly. I just made myself visible, slightly disheveled, appearing visibly confused, exactly the image they wanted to build of me. People started to notice. "Eleanor, it's been a while. I thought you were traveling like Steve mentioned," said the grocery clerk. "Traveling? No, I'm staying with a friend because my son took my house," I replied with a naive air. Conversations like this multiplied across the small town. When someone asked me directly, I responded with simple facts, no direct accusations. "I was left at the airport." "No, I don't know why." "Yes." My documents vanished. No, I can't go back to my house right now. In 2 weeks, the first results showed up. Steve called me, furious. What garbage are you spreading all over town? What garbage, son? I'm just living my life. People are asking questions at work. The pastor called me in to talk. You have to stop this. Quote, stop what? Existing? Wasn't that what you wanted when you left me at LAX? He hung up abruptly. 2 days later, Jessica showed up at Marge's house. Eleanor, this has to stop, she said without a greeting. You're ruining our reputation. How interesting, I replied calmly. You're more worried about your reputation than the fact that you abandoned a 65-year-old woman at an airport without documents. It was Steve's idea, she blurted out, revealing the first crack in the couple's armor. I said it was too much, that just transferring the house was enough. So you admit to the fraudulent transfer? Her face paled as she realized her mistake. It wasn't exactly like that. It was exactly like that, Jessica. And I have enough proof to show that to any judge or pastor or your friends at the charity. She left quickly, but I knew the seed of discord was planted. The plan was working. The third phase of my strategy involved my former students. As a teacher for 4 decades, I had educated generations in the city. Many now held influential positions: journalists, lawyers, public officials, business owners. I organized a coffee reunion at Marge's house. 20 former students attended, eager to see their beloved teacher again. Amidst apple pie and memories, I casually shared my situation. I don't want to hurt my son, I explained with genuine tears. I just want to understand why this happened and get back what is rightfully mine. The effect was immediate. Claudia, editor of the local newspaper, asked to do a story about financial exploitation against seniors. Mark, manager of the bank where Steve had an account, offered to look for irregularities. Teresa, a legitimate social worker, promised to make a truthful report about my mental capacity. The support network I built throughout my life was now mobilizing around me, not for revenge, but for justice. And for the first time since the abandonment at the airport, I felt I was not alone in this battle. The final revelation. The next morning, I got an unexpected call. It was Martha, Steve's mother-in-law, and Jessica's mom. Eleanor, I need to see you. There are things you need to know. The meeting with Martha was a game changer. We met at a small cafe downtown, away from the prying eyes of Steve and Jessica's acquaintances. I never approved of what they planned, she began, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. Jessica told me everything a few months ago, thinking I would back her. How could I support something so cruel? Martha then spun a story that, though painful, finally made sense. Steve was deep in debt. Risky investments, a lifestyle beyond his means, maxed out credit cards. The easiest solution in his mind was my house, valued at over $800,000 and mortgage-free. The initial plan was to convince you to sell and live with them, Martha explained. When they realized you'd never agree, they went for something more drastic. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I tried to talk them out of it, I swear. When I found out they were actually going through with it, I called you that morning, but Steve answered your cell. He said you were heading out for a drive and would call me later. I felt a chill, remembering that I hadn't found my phone that morning. Steve had said I must have left it at home, and there was no time to look. After I found out what happened, I was sick with worry, but I was scared of getting more involved, of making things worse. When I saw yesterday's paper, I knew I needed to talk to you. Quote, the article Claudia wrote, while not naming names, clearly described a case of financial exploitation against a respected local educator. The community was furious. Jessica is a wreck, Martha continued. They're fighting constantly. Steve blames her for talking to me. She blames him for the whole idea. But the worst is what they did with the house. What about the house? I asked, my heart pounding. They've already spent almost all the money from the mortgage they took out. Quote, mortgage? But the transfer hasn't even been finalized. They used fraudulent documents, Eleanor. A complicated scheme with a shady notary from another city. They secured a mortgage of $500,000 against the property. I felt the blood drain from my face. They hadn't just tried to steal my house. They had already financially compromised it. Doctor, Paul had warned me about that possibility, but I hadn't imagined they could move so fast. Where is the money now? Part went to pay off debts. part for a new car for Steve, part for renovations on the house your house. The rest, honestly, I don't know. I left that meeting with a mix of shock and renewed resolve. I immediately called Dr. Paul. "We need to act now," he said after hearing the new information. "We're going to the judge today with a request for search and seizure. We have enough evidence of documented fraud." The next 24 hours were a blur. The judge, sympathetic to the case and impressed by the sheer volume of evidence we'd collected, issued not only the search and seizure order but also an emergency eviction notice against Steve and Jessica. "It's not common in family cases," Dr. Paul explained, but the judge understood there was a risk of complete dissipation of assets and irreparable harm. The next morning, accompanied by court officers, police, Dr. Paul, and, at my insistence, Marge, I arrived at the door of my own home, a place I had lived for 35 years, but from which I had been exiled for nearly a month. Steve opened the door, still in his pajamas, his eyes puffy from lack of sleep. His face went from surprise to sheer shock when he saw the group behind me. "Mom, what is this?" The court officer stepped forward. "Mr. Steve Vance, we are here to execute a court order for eviction and search and seizure. You have 2 hours to gather personal belongings and vacate the premises." "This is nuts," he yelled, his face red with rage. "This house is mine." "I'm afraid not, sir," the officer replied calmly, handing him the papers. All transfer documents were deemed fraudulent by the judge. The property legally belongs to Miss Eleanor Vance. Jessica appeared behind him, pale. "Steve, what's going on?" "Your mother ratted us out. That's what happened," he accused. "My mother? What's she got to do with this?" While they argued, I walked into my house. The impact was immediate. Nothing was as I had left it. The antique furniture I loved was gone, replaced by modern, impersonal pieces. The yellow walls that Frank and I painted together were now gray. Family photos, my books, my memories, everything had been removed or relegated to boxes I found stacked in the garage. "What did you do with my things?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We renovated, Mom," Steve replied, trying to sound reasonable despite the chaos. "This house needed an update. We did you a favor." "A favor?" I looked around the house I no longer recognized. "You call this a favor? Destroying my memories? Erasing your father's traces from this house?" For the first time, I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes. It was momentary, quickly replaced by his usual defensiveness. "You never got modern decor, Mom. This place was a museum. Nobody lives like that anymore." The police and the court officer began the formal process, inventorying items, checking documents. Jessica, in a panic, ran back and forth, grabbing clothes and personal items. Steve, after a few more futile attempts to argue, locked himself in the office with his cell phone, likely calling an attorney. Marge put her arm around my shoulders. "It's okay, Eleanor. You'll get your house back. The decor can be redone." Quote, "It's not just the furniture," I replied, tears finally overcoming my resolve. "It's the feeling of violation. They didn't just try to take my house, they tried to erase my existence from it." The officers found all the documents Steve had hidden, including my originals and the forgeries he created. They also found bank statements detailing the expenditures with the fraudulent mortgage money: $150,000 on personal debts, $200,000 on a luxury car which would now be impounded, $100,000 on new furniture and renovations, and $50,000 in a newly opened account in the Bahamas. 2 hours later, as stipulated in the court order, Steve and Jessica left, carrying only suitcases with clothes and personal articles. The new car was towed. The furniture would remain until the complete resolution of the process, as it was technically bought with fraudulently obtained money against my property. "This won't be the end of it," Steve threatened as he left. "You're going to regret this, Mother." "I already regret it, son," I replied with surprising calm. "I regret not realizing sooner what was happening. I regret blindly trusting you. But most of all, I regret failing as a mother, to the point where you thought it acceptable to do this, to the person who gave you life." He didn't respond. With one last look of disdain, he got into the taxi where Jessica was already waiting, crying. When everyone left, the officers, the police, even Marge, who promised to return later with dinner, I was left alone in my transformed house. I sat on the unfamiliar sofa and cried. I cried for the lost time, for the betrayed trust, for the years of memories they tried to wipe from the walls. But mostly, I cried for the son I thought I had raised versus the man he revealed himself to be. Frank's legacy and rebuilding. After exhausting my tears, I got up and started exploring every corner of the house, remembering how it was before, planning how it would be again. In what was Steve's room as a teenager, I found the boxes with the family photo albums they didn't have the heart to throw away. I sat on the floor, flipping through photos of a smiling boy I once knew, trying to understand where everything went wrong. That's when I found, tucked between the pages of an old album, a yellowed envelope addressed to me in Frank's unmistakable handwriting. My husband, ever so cautious, had left a letter I never knew existed, likely hidden by Steve as soon as he found it. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and began to read words written 5 years ago, but which seemed painfully prophetic for the current moment. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this letter, it means I have passed on and something serious has happened for you to find it. I hope it was by chance during a nostalgic cleaning and not out of necessity. But I know our son better than you think, and I fear that one day this letter may be needed. Steve was always ambitious since he was a kid. Remember how he counted the coins in his piggy bank every night? How fascinated he was with the big houses when we drove through the rich neighborhoods. At first, we found it admirable, a child with vision, determination. But over the years, I saw something that you, with your mother's heart, perhaps refused to see. His ambition had no ethical limits. The small signs were there, the money that disappeared from your purse, the lies about grades in school, the way he treated less fortunate classmates. I tried to correct him, but you always thought I was too harsh. He's just a boy, you'd say. But boys grow up, Eleanor, and they become the men we mold. In the last few years, Steve sought me out several times to discuss succession planning, as he called it. He wanted to know the exact value of the house, the savings, the insurance policies. At first, I believed it was legitimate concern for our well-being. Then I realized it was calculation. That's why I took some precautions you don't know about. First, I registered everything exclusively in your name after my retirement: the house, the car, the savings. Everything is registered only as yours, not ours. This prevents half of it from automatically going to Steve as my inheritance. Second, I opened an account in your name at the Security Bank Central Branch, which Steve doesn't know about. I transferred a significant amount there, not everything, as that would arouse suspicion, but enough to guarantee your independence in case something happens. The password is our wedding anniversary, followed by the code we used on the door of the teacher's lounge. Remember? Third, and perhaps most importantly, I discreetly hired Dr. Paul Mendez to be your attorney in case of need. He has copies of all important documents and instructions to help you if Steve tries anything. His number is engraved on that wooden keychain I gave you on our last anniversary. It's not just decorative. Eleanor, I know you're wondering why I never told you about these suspicions. The truth is, I wasn't sure, and the idea of poisoning your relationship with our only child seemed too cruel. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Steve is exactly the loving son you believe he is, and this letter will never be necessary. I prayed that would be the case. But if you are reading this in a moment of crisis, you should know that you are not alone. You are always stronger than you think, Eleanor. You were the one who confronted the school board when they tried to censor your materials about the Great Depression. You were the one who organized the '89 strike that secured our rights. You were the one who educated generations of young people to think critically. Use that strength now. Don't let the pain or the betrayal define you. Fight for what is yours, but don't lose your essence in the process. Revenge may seem sweet, but true justice is more satisfying and will allow you to sleep in peace. And always remember, our value is not in the house or the savings. It's in the lives we touched, the students we inspired, the love we shared. No one can steal that from you. With all my love, today and always, Frank. Tears streamed down my face as I carefully folded the letter. Frank, even absent for 5 years, was still looking out for me, still protecting me, and more importantly, he reminded me who I really was. I wiped my tears and picked up the wooden keychain I had been using since Frank gave it to me, but had never examined closely. Turning it in my hands, I noticed a small bulge. I pressed it, and a secret compartment opened, revealing a tiny piece of paper with a phone number exactly the same one Dr. Paul had given me weeks ago. Frank had foreseen everything. And that unknown bank account, did it still exist? With trembling hands, I dialed the number for Security Bank. I'd like to check on an account in my name, Eleanor Vance. The account would have been opened about 5 years ago by my late husband, Frank Vance. After some security checks, the assistant confirmed, "Yes, Miss Vance, the account is active and has a current balance of $387,942.53 with the accumulated interest." I almost dropped the phone. Frank had not only anticipated the problems, he had given me the means to solve them. With that money, I could restore the house, replace furniture similar to what I lost, and still have enough to live comfortably for years. That night I slept in the guest room, as my master bedroom had been completely remodeled with a strange bed and impersonal decor. But for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, with Frank's letter under the pillow and a clear plan for the future. The next morning I began the rebuild. I called Dr. Paul to inform him about the secret account and discuss the next legal steps. The fraudulent mortgage would be challenged, and although the process might be slow, the chances were excellent considering the solid evidence of fraud. "The bank that granted the mortgage will have to eat the loss," Dr. Paul explained. "They failed to perform due diligence in verifying the documents. The house will remain yours, free and clear." Next, I called Marge and my other teacher friends. In a few hours, they organized a volunteer cleanup and reorganization effort. More than 10 former colleagues showed up, bringing food, cleaning supplies, and something even more valuable, solidarity. "We're going to clean the bad juju out of your house, Eleanor," said Lois, my friend of 30 years, opening all the windows. While the women worked, I told them about Frank's letter. There was no shame in sharing the story now. The entire city already knew about Steve's scheme through the newspaper report. "Frank was always a cautious man," commented Yvonne, who had also known my husband. "He always said he hoped for the best in people, but prepared for the worst." "I wish he were here," I confessed, feeling his absence with renewed intensity. "He is, sweetie," Lois replied, pointing to my heart. And from that letter, it seems he never really left. Over the following weeks, I dedicated myself to reclaiming my house. I couldn't restore it exactly as it was. Some objects were irreplaceable, like the armchair where Frank read the newspaper or the wall clock we got as a wedding gift. But I could create a new home that honored the past while looking toward the future. I hired a carpenter to recreate the dining room table as close to the original as possible. I bought new bookshelves for my books, which fortunately were only packed and not destroyed. I salvaged some antique pieces at the town's Goodwill and complemented them with new furniture that I genuinely liked, not what Steve and Jessica had chosen. The court case moved forward. The investigation revealed that the scheme was even more complex than we imagined. The dishonest notary had facilitated fraudulent transfers in at least 6 other cases, all involving seniors. The story ended up in regional papers and even on a Dateline-style television program about financial crimes. Steve and Jessica were facing not only a civil lawsuit, but also criminal charges. Martha occasionally updated me on their situation. They were living apart now, each blaming the other for the plan's failure. Steve had lost his job due to the scandal, and Jessica was being avoided by the social circles she so valued. Reconciliation and a new beginning. 3 months after getting my house back, I received an unexpected call. "Mom, it's me." Steve's voice sounded foreign, defeated. My heart raced, but I kept my cool. "Hello, Steve. I need to see you, please. I have a hearing tomorrow. I could face 5 years in prison." So, that was it. He wasn't repentant. He was desperate. And what do you expect me to do? If you drop the charges, if you say it was all a misunderstanding, I can't do that, Steve. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Silence on the line. Then, "For God's sake, Mother, I'm your son. Are you going to let your only son go to jail?" The question hung in the air for a few moments. I almost gave in. The maternal instinct is powerful. But then I remembered Frank's letter, Steve's premeditation, the airport, the 3 months of anguish and humiliation. "Did you think about that when you abandoned me at LAX? When you forged my signature? When you planned to send me to a nursing home?" I wasn't thinking straight. We were in debt, desperate. And what would your solution have been if I hadn't found out? Leaving me on the street, or worse? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Steve, you chose this path, Now you have to face the consequences. So that's it. No forgiveness, no second chance. I took a deep breath before answering. Forgiveness is a journey, not an event. Maybe one day I'll be able to forgive you completely. But trust is different. It needs to be earned back with actions, not with desperate words when you're cornered. What do you want me to do? The choked voice asked. I want you to take responsibility for what you did. Face the legal consequences, reflect on your choices, and when you're truly ready for authentic reconciliation, not out of necessity, but out of genuine repentance, then we can talk again. I hung up the phone with trembling hands, silent tears running down my face. Despite everything, he was still my son, the child I carried for 9 months, who I taught to walk, to read, to dream. It hurt deeply to deny him what he was asking, but it would be even more painful to allow him to escape the consequences of his actions without real remorse. That would only reinforce that the behavior was acceptable. The following week, accompanied by Dr. Paul, I attended the hearing. Steve saw me. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, ashamed. He accepted a plea deal. 2 years in prison with the possibility of a work release program after 8 months, full financial restitution, and community service upon release. Jessica received a suspended sentence with mandatory community service, as the evidence suggested that although complicit, she had been less active in the planning. Martha thanked me for not asking for the maximum penalty for her daughter. She made a terrible mistake, but I think she learned her lesson. Quote, 6 months passed. My house was completely restored, not as an exact copy of what it was, but as a new home that reflected both my memories and my new reality. I went back to teaching as a volunteer for a senior literacy project. I found purpose in helping people who, like me, are often underestimated by society. One afternoon, hosting my students for an end-of-semester coffee, I heard the doorbell. It was Martha. Eleanor, I'm sorry to show up unannounced. Steve asked me to deliver this. She held out a simple envelope with my name written in my son's unmistakable handwriting. I thanked her and saved it to read after my guests left. That night, alone on the porch, I had renovated with vibrant colors, a choice the old Steve would have criticized as ***. Old lady stuff, ***. I opened the envelope. Steve's letter was lengthy, handwritten across several pages. Different from the quick digital communications he always preferred, the effort of writing manually already indicated a change. Mom, I'm writing this letter from the most unlikely place, a prison cell I share with 3 other men. I never imagined being here, but maybe this is exactly where I needed to be to finally see the truth. In the first few months, I blamed everyone but myself. I blamed Jessica for not being discreet enough. I blamed the notary for not making more convincing documents. I even blamed the old lady for being too clever for a senior. Yes, I reached that level of distortion. Then, during a mandatory therapy session, the psychologist asked me a simple question. What did your mother do to deserve what you planned for her? I stayed silent for a long time, looking for justifications. The old lady was stubborn with money. She didn't understand our modern needs. She was too attached to that old house. But the more I tried to justify, the emptier my excuses sounded. The truth, which I'm finally ready to admit, is that you did nothing to deserve my betrayal. On the contrary, you dedicated your life to giving me an education, love, and opportunities. You sacrificed your own dreams so I could achieve mine. And how did I repay you? With greed, manipulation, and cruelty. The psychologist helped me understand that my behavior didn't start out of nowhere. I was always obsessed with status, with appearances. I believed I deserved more, that normal rules didn't apply to me, that the ends justified the means. I blamed my financial problems, but the truth is, my greed was insatiable. Even if we had 5 houses like yours, I would probably still want more. Today, I understand that the plan to abandon you at the airport was not only criminal, it was inhumane. Leaving my own mother, 65 years old, without documents, without support, as if you were a disposable object. How could I? How did I become this monster? I don't expect your forgiveness. Frankly, I don't think I deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm working to become a better person. Someone who can one day look at himself in the mirror without shame. Someone who honors the sacrifice that you and my father made for me instead of betraying it. If one day when I get out of here, you allow me to demonstrate this repentance with actions, I will be eternally grateful. If not, I will understand. In either case, I will spend the rest of my life trying to compensate for the harm I caused to you and to everyone I hurt with my arrogance and selfishness. With deep regret and belated respect, Steve, I read the letter 3 times, my emotions oscillating between skepticism, hope, pain, and a tentative relief. Was it sincere, or just another manipulation by a man desperate to improve his situation? I didn't have the answers yet, only the certainty that I needed time to process those words. I put the letter in my desk drawer and decided I wouldn't reply immediately. Time would tell if Steve's repentance was genuine. In the following weeks, I received 2 more letters from him. They didn't mention forgiveness or requests. They only shared reflections on his childhood, memories of family moments, and observations about his therapeutic process in prison. He seemed to be truly doing internal work, although it was impossible to be sure from a distance. After 3 months of one-sided correspondence, I decided to reply. My letter was brief. Steve, I received your letters. I can't say I'm ready to forgive completely, but I acknowledge your efforts to reflect on your actions. That's a start. You ask about my daily life. I went back to teaching as a volunteer. I'm helping seniors learn to read and write. It's gratifying to see people my age or older discovering new worlds through words. The house is different now. I didn't try to recreate exactly what it was before. Some things, when broken, don't return to their original shape, but we are creating something new from the fragments. I found the letter your father left for me. He was always more perceptive about you than I wanted to admit. Perhaps we both failed you in different ways. He by being too harsh, me by being too permissive. Extremes rarely produce balance. I don't know what the future holds for our relationship. For now, I'm willing to continue this correspondence, one step at a time. Eleanor. Our exchange of letters continued for months. Gradually, Steve began asking questions about Frank, about our life before he was born, about choices we made as parents. I realized that perhaps for the first time, he was genuinely interested in understanding who we were as people, not just as parental figures who existed to meet his needs. 8 months into his imprisonment, Steve was granted progression to the work release program. He could work during the day, returning to the facility at night. He got a job as an administrative assistant at a small company, nothing compared to the managerial position he had before, but it was a new beginning. That's when I received a call from him. Mom, can I visit next Sunday? I understand if it's too soon. He hesitated. Was I ready to see him in person? To face the son who had planned my exile? Come for lunch, I finally replied. Noon. Sunday arrived with an almost palpable anxiety. I prepared a simple meal, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the apple cobbler he liked as a child. Nothing extravagant, but enough to indicate it wasn't just a formal visit. At 5 to 12, the doorbell rang. Steve was punctual, something rare in the past. I opened the door, and the shock was immediate. My son had changed drastically. Thinner, gray hair at the temples that wasn't there before. Deep circles under his eyes. The 8 months in custody had taken their physical toll, but it was his gaze that struck me most. The arrogant eyes that always seemed to evaluate everything with disdain were now lowered, almost humble. "Hello, Mom," he said simply, without attempting a hug, respecting the space I hadn't yet offered. "Come in, Steve." Quote. He followed me to the living room, looking around curiously. The house is different, more colorful. Yes, I decided it was time for a change. It suits you. You always liked bright colors. I remember your teacher outfits. This comment surprised me. Steve rarely noticed details about me. Lunch started tensely with superficial conversation about the weather, the news, my volunteer work. We avoided the elephant in the room. Everything that had happened, everything we still needed to process. It was Steve who finally broke the barrier. "Mom, I know words aren't enough, but I need to tell you in person. I am so sorry. Deeply, truly remorseful." I put my silverware down on the table, watching him closely. Why, Steve? That's what I never understood. Why go to such an extreme? You could have asked for financial help. You could have been honest about your difficulties. Quote. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the food he had barely touched. It wasn't just about money, although I convinced myself of that at the time. It was pride, shame. I couldn't admit I had failed financially, that I had made bad decisions. It was easier to take what I thought I deserved than to admit I didn't deserve it. And that justified abandoning me like garbage? Nothing justifies it, he replied immediately. Absolutely nothing. I became a monster, Mom. I built a fortress of justifications. I convinced myself I was doing what was necessary, that deep down you would be fine, that maybe it would even be better for you to be in a place suitable for your age, a nursing facility. Yes, I lied to myself that it would be a good, comfortable place. But the truth is, I didn't even research places. I didn't really care about your well-being. I just wanted your money and your house. The brutal honesty took me by surprise. There were no more excuses, just the raw truth. What changed, Steve? How do I know this isn't just another plan, another manipulation? He lifted his eyes, meeting mine for the first time. You can't know for sure. I'm still learning to trust this change myself. All I can offer are consistent actions over time, not empty promises. We remained silent for a few minutes, each absorbing the weight of that conversation. What happened with Jessica? I finally asked, shifting the subject slightly. We got divorced. She moved back in with her mother permanently. She's in therapy too. And your future? Do you have plans? I'm rebuilding from scratch. When I finish my sentence, I plan to work with financial education for people in debt, use my own story as a warning, show that greed and illegal shortcuts only lead to destruction. Quote, I nodded, still cautious, but noticing the absence of grandiosity in his plans. A good sign. The old Steve would have talked about rebuilding an empire, about proving to everyone that he was still successful. As he was about to leave at the end of the afternoon, he stopped at the door. Mom, I don't expect to return to our old relationship. I know I broke something precious and irreplaceable, but if you allow me, I'd like to build something new. Not as a demanding son, but as one person who respects another person, one step at a time. One step at a time, I agreed. That's all I can offer right now. He nodded, accepting those limited terms with a humility he had never shown before. In the following months, Steve kept his word: weekly visits, always respectful, always maintaining appropriate emotional distance. Small gestures, fixing a leaky faucet, helping to carry heavy groceries without demanding recognition or gratitude. He started attending a support group for people with compulsive financial behavior. He started an anonymous blog sharing his recovery journey and warning about the dangers of uncontrolled greed. 1 year after his definitive release, I received an unexpected invitation. Steve had organized a graduation ceremony for the seniors in the literacy project where I volunteered. He secured donations from local businesses, organized a small cocktail reception, printed certificates, even hired a volunteer photographer. Why? I asked when he told me about the surprise. Because your work matters. Because these people deserve recognition. Because I want to support what is important to you without taking it for myself, without controlling it, just contributing. The ceremony was a success. 20 seniors between 70 and 92 years old receiving their literacy certificates, many crying because they could finally read and write. Steve remained discreetly backstage, helping with logistics, never seeking credit or attention. At the end of the night, as the guests were leaving, I found him organizing the chairs. Thank you for this, I said sincerely. It meant a lot to them and to me. It was my pleasure, Mom. Watching you teach is inspiring. It always was. Come. A small spark of genuine reconnection ignited between us at that moment. Not complete forgiveness, not unrestricted trust, those perhaps would never return entirely. But something new and fragile was beginning to grow in the rubble of what we had lost. Today, 3 years after the fateful abandonment at the airport, our relationship continues to evolve. Steve lives in a modest apartment, works for a financial education nonprofit, and maintains a simple life. We don't try to pretend the past didn't happen. It's always present, like a scar that occasionally aches when the weather changes. But we've learned to build something around that scar. Not a traditional mother-son relationship, but a connection between two adults who recognize both the damage and the possibility of healing. As for me, that woman abandoned at the airport with $200 in her purse no longer exists. In her place is a 68-year-old woman who discovered her own strength, who rebuilt her life on her own terms, who learned that even in the greatest betrayals, there can be seeds of transformation. My house is now truly mine, not just legally, but spiritually. Every corner reflects my choices, my tastes, my stories. Frank's photographs remain on the walls, but there are also new paintings from trips I took alone, from celebrations with my senior students, from moments that represent my rediscovered independence. And on my nightstand, I keep 2 letters, one from Frank, reminding me that I was always stronger than I thought, and one from Steve, a reminder that even the most damaged relationships can find new paths if there is the courage to face the truth and the persistence to rebuild brick by brick. The betrayal never completely disappears. It becomes part of the story, a painful but instructive chapter, and perhaps that is the greatest lesson I learned. Our value is not in never falling, but in how we get up after the fall. It's not in never being betrayed, but in how we rebuild our dignity despite the betrayal. Now, if you like this story, click to subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member for access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll see you there.